Sweetheart, these seats are not for everybody, Karen Mitchell said with a smile that made several passengers look up from their phones, and in that single moment, a quiet little girl sitting alone in first class became the center of attention inside the cabin. 9-year-old Ava Johnson froze. Her small hands tightened around the faded brown teddy bear resting on her lap. The bear had one ear slightly bent and a tiny pink ribbon around its neck, and she held it the same way other children held security blankets. Ava sat in seat 2A wearing lavender headphones and a yellow sweatshirt with tiny stars printed across the sleeves. Coloring books and crayons lay neatly beside her, exactly the way her mother had left them. Just 5 minutes earlier, Monica Johnson had kissed her forehead and smiled. "I will be right back, sweetheart. Stay right here, okay?" Ava had nodded. She trusted her mother completely. She always did. Now Karen stood beside her with folded arms. "Honey, where are your parents?" she asked loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Ava looked up politely. "My mommy will be right back." Karen glanced around the premium cabin and forced a laugh. "Well, until then, I think you are sitting in the wrong section." Across the aisle, a businessman lowered his tablet. A woman near the window removed her reading glasses. Another passenger stopped sipping coffee. The mood inside the cabin shifted. Ava blinked in confusion. "But my mommy said to wait here." Karen smiled again, but there was no warmth behind it. "Sweetie, first-class tickets are expensive. Maybe there has been a mistake." The little girl looked down at her teddy bear. "Mr. Buttons says Mommy never makes mistakes." A few passengers exchanged glances. One elderly man near row 3 frowned. Another woman shook her head quietly. Ava's eyes moved toward the front of the cabin, hoping to see her mother returning. But Monica was nowhere in sight. Karen crouched slightly. "Why do you not come with me for now? We will find a better seat." Better seat. Ava did not understand what that meant. She only knew her mother told her to stay right there. She remembered the smile, the kiss on her forehead, the promise. So she simply hugged Mr. Buttons tighter. "My mommy said to wait here." Karen sighed dramatically. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." The words floated through the cabin like cold air. Ava lowered her eyes. She was too young to understand prejudice, too young to understand judgment. But she understood something else. Her mother always came back. And somewhere beyond the curtain separating first class from the front galley, Monica Johnson was finishing a conversation, completely unaware that strangers had already decided her daughter did not belong where she had every right to be. Mr. Buttons never worried when Mommy was gone for a few minutes, because Mr. Buttons knew she always came back. That was what Ava Johnson liked to tell herself whenever she missed her mother. The 9-year-old smiled faintly as she hugged the old teddy bear closer against her yellow sweatshirt. Its fur was worn thin from years of bedtime stories, long car rides, and quiet moments when life felt uncertain. Monica Johnson had given Mr. Buttons to her daughter when Ava was 4 years old. Ever since then, the bear had become part of every adventure. The crayons beside Ava remained untouched now. A picture of a rainbow she had started coloring sat half-finished on the tray table. A few minutes earlier, everything had been normal. Monica had knelt beside her seat and tucked a strand of hair behind Ava's ear. "Mommy has to talk to someone for just a minute, sweetheart. Stay right here and keep Mr. Buttons company." Ava giggled. "He gets lonely." Monica laughed and kissed her forehead. "I know. I will be right back." Those words stayed in Ava's mind now. She trusted her mother completely. Monica never forgot promises. Not once. Not when Ava was sick with the flu. Not when thunderstorms scared her. Not when she cried on the first day of school. Monica always showed up. That was why Ava did not understand why the nice seat suddenly seemed to make everyone uncomfortable. She looked around the first-class cabin. The seats were big and soft. The sunlight through the windows made the clouds outside look like cotton candy. People wore business suits and expensive watches. But Ava did not care about any of that. She cared about coloring rainbows and listening to songs on her lavender headphones. She cared about Mr. Buttons. And she cared about waiting for Mommy. Across the aisle, an older woman smiled sympathetically. A young man in row 4 glanced over with concern. But Ava did not notice. Her eyes kept drifting toward the front of the cabin. She expected to see Monica's familiar smile appear at any second. Karen Mitchell sighed again nearby. "Sweetheart, I really need you to come with me." Ava shook her head softly. "Mommy said stay here." Her voice was gentle. Not stubborn. Just certain. Because Monica Johnson had taught her daughter something very simple. If you are ever afraid, baby, remember 2 things. Tell the truth. And remember that Mommy is never far away. So Ava sat quietly. She adjusted Mr. Buttons on her lap and waited. Because in her 9-year-old heart, there was no doubt. Her mother always came back. And just beyond the curtain separating first class from the front galley, Monica Johnson was finishing a conversation and smiling at a message on her phone from Ava, completely unaware that her little girl's faith in her was about to be tested by strangers who had already decided she did not belong. People reveal themselves when they think nobody important is watching. Unfortunately for Ava Johnson, several people inside the first-class cabin were beginning to reveal exactly who they were. Karen Mitchell straightened her uniform and exchanged a glance with Eric Collins, the purser who had just stepped over from the galley after hearing part of the conversation. Eric was 45, polite by habit, but quick to trust assumptions. He looked at the little girl sitting alone with crayons and a worn teddy bear and frowned slightly. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. Karen sighed dramatically. "The child says her mother is coming back, but I do not think she belongs up here." Eric lowered his eyes toward seat 2A. "Sweetheart, where is your parent?" Ava looked up politely. "My mommy will be right back." Eric forced a smile. "Do you know where she went?" "She said stay here." Karen folded her arms. "Exactly. We have no adult present. We need to move her until somebody shows up." Across the aisle, a man wearing an expensive navy suit glanced over. His name was Thomas Reynolds, owner of several real estate companies in Denver. He had been typing emails on his laptop until the commotion caught his attention. He looked at Ava and then toward Karen. "Honestly, I have never seen children sitting up here by themselves," he said. Karen nodded immediately. "Thank you?" Thomas shrugged. "No offense, but these seats cost thousands of dollars." Ava did not understand the conversation. She only hugged Mr. Buttons tighter. The bear's little pink ribbon rested against her cheek. Nearby, a younger flight attendant named Sophia Green paused while preparing drinks. Something about the scene felt wrong. She remembered seeing a well-dressed black woman helping the little girl with her headphones earlier. Everything had seemed normal. "Karen," Sophia said quietly. "I saw her mother before." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Then where is she?" Sophia hesitated. She did not know. But she remembered the smile between mother and daughter. She remembered how carefully the woman had tucked a blanket around the little girl before leaving. Across row 3, 70-year-old William Carter lowered his newspaper and frowned. "The child seems calm enough to me," he said. Eric smiled politely. "Sir, we are just trying to avoid confusion." William shook his head. "Funny. The only confused people I see are standing up." A few passengers chuckled softly. Karen's smile disappeared. Thomas returned to his laptop but muttered, "Well, children do not usually sit in first class alone." The words floated across the cabin. Ava lowered her eyes. She did not understand why grown-ups kept talking about where she belonged. She only knew what mattered. Mommy said stay here. Mommy always came back. And somewhere beyond the front galley, Monica Johnson was finally heading back toward first class with a smile on her face, completely unaware that strangers had already decided who her daughter was before ever learning her name. Little hearts break quietly. They do not always cry. Sometimes they simply hold tighter to the things that make them feel safe. Ava Johnson sat perfectly still in seat 2A. Mr. Buttons rested against her chest, his soft fur pressed beneath her chin. The pink ribbon around his neck had started to fade years ago, but Ava loved him anyway. Her fingers wrapped around him the same way they always did when she felt nervous. Around her, the first-class cabin no longer felt friendly. The clouds outside still floated peacefully beyond the windows. The sunlight still painted warm colors across the seats. But inside her small heart, something felt different. Karen Mitchell glanced impatiently toward the front galley. "We cannot just leave her sitting here," she whispered to Eric Collins. "Boarding is almost finished." Eric sighed. "I know." Sophia Green frowned. "Maybe we should wait another minute." Karen shook her head. "For what?" William Carter folded his newspaper again. "For her mother," he answered calmly. Ava heard the word and immediately looked toward the front curtain. "Mommy." But Monica still had not appeared. Her little shoulders sank slightly. Not because she doubted her mother. Never that. She just missed her. She remembered a thunderstorm from 2 years earlier. She had been scared of the lightning outside her bedroom window. Mr. Buttons had been in her arms then too. Monica sat beside her all night and whispered, "Baby, fear is loud, but love is louder. Whenever you feel scared, remember I am never far away." Ava remembered every word. She remembered the smile. She remembered feeling safe. So she hugged Mr. Buttons tighter now. "Mommy said stay here," she whispered softly. Karen crouched beside her again. "Sweetheart, I know your mommy means well, but maybe she made a mistake." Ava shook her head immediately. "Mommy does not make mistakes." Her voice was tiny, but certain. A woman in row 4 smiled sadly. Another passenger lowered his eyes. Even Thomas Reynolds stopped typing and glanced toward the little girl. Sophia felt tears building behind her eyes. She had younger sisters. She recognized trust when she saw it. And this little girl trusted her mother with every piece of her heart. Karen stood and sighed. "Unbelievable." But William Carter spoke quietly. "No, young lady. What is unbelievable is that a child understands loyalty better than most adults." Ava lowered her head and buried her face against Mr. Buttons. She was trying very hard not to cry. Because Mommy said brave girls tell the truth. Brave girls wait patiently. Brave girls trust love. And only a few steps away, Monica Johnson was walking back toward first class with a smile on her face, completely unaware that her daughter was sitting there fighting tears and protecting the promise she believed with all her heart. Something remarkable happens when ordinary people decide to listen to their conscience. The first-class cabin had slowly begun to change. Not loudly. Not dramatically. One person at a time. Sophia Green stood near the galley pretending to organize drink menus, but her eyes kept drifting back toward seat 2A. Ava Johnson sat quietly with Mr. Buttons pressed against her chest, trying very hard to be brave. The sight broke something inside Sophia. She remembered being 8 years old and getting lost in a shopping mall for 10 terrifying minutes. Her mother had found her crying beside a toy store and hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. Looking at Ava now, Sophia saw that same fear hiding behind those little eyes. "Karen, enough," she said softly. Karen Mitchell turned immediately. "Excuse me? We should wait for her mother." Karen laughed in disbelief. "Sophia, this is first class, not daycare." Sophia frowned. "She has done nothing wrong." Eric Collins folded his arms. "Nobody is saying she did anything wrong." William Carter lowered his newspaper once again. "That is exactly what you are saying," he answered calmly. "You just do not like hearing it out loud." The older man's voice silenced everyone for a second. Even Thomas Reynolds stopped typing. He looked at the little girl sitting alone and finally saw what everyone else was beginning to see. Not a seat number. Not a ticket. Just a child waiting for her mother. Thomas slowly closed his laptop. "Honestly, I think we should leave her alone," he said quietly. Karen stared at him. "You too?" "She is 9," Thomas answered. "Not a problem." Another passenger lifted her phone slightly, not recording yet, but watching carefully. A younger couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. The atmosphere had changed. People were no longer watching because they were curious. They were watching because they cared. But Karen refused to let it go. "Boarding is ending," she said sharply. "We cannot just wait forever." Ava's eyes filled with tears, though none fell. She buried her face against Mr. Button's and whispered softly, "Mommy said she would come back." Sophia felt tears sting her own eyes. William Carter smiled gently. "And I think she will, sweetheart." Ava looked up at him. "Really?" William nodded. "Some promises are stronger than fear." The little girl smiled faintly. But Karen had already made up her mind. She stepped forward again. "Sweetheart, I need you to come with me now." Sophia took a step forward immediately. "Karen, do not!" And at that exact moment, beyond the curtain separating first class from the front galley, Monica Johnson rounded the corner carrying her phone and smiling, completely unaware that an entire cabin had slowly chosen sides while her little girl held on to Faith with both arms wrapped around an old teddy bear. A mother knows something is wrong long before anyone says a word. Monica Johnson rounded the corner from the front galley with her phone still in her hand and a smile on her face. She had only stepped away for a few minutes to finish a conversation, fully expecting to return to the sight of her daughter coloring rainbows and humming along to her favorite songs. But the moment she looked towards seat 2A, her smile disappeared. Ava Johnson was holding Mr. Button so tightly that his little pink ribbon was pressed against her cheek. Her eyes were red. Not from crying. From trying not to cry. And every mother in the world knows the difference. Monica slowed her steps. The sound of conversations around her faded. She no longer noticed the overhead bins or the sunlight pouring through the windows. She only saw her little girl sitting alone, trying so hard to be brave. "Mommy!" Ava's tiny voice broke through the silence. In an instant, Monica was beside her. She knelt down and touched her daughter's face gently. "Baby, what happened?" Ava immediately wrapped one arm around her mother while keeping the other around Mr. Button's. "They said maybe I should move because I do not belong here." Monica blinked once. Her eyes moved slowly toward Karen Mitchell and Eric Collins. Then back to Ava. "Who said that?" Ava lowered her head. "It is okay, Mommy. Mr. Buttons and I waited." Those words shattered something inside Sophia Green. She lowered her eyes, unable to hide her tears. William Carter folded his newspaper and watched quietly. Even Thomas Reynolds looked uncomfortable. Monica kissed Ava's forehead softly. "You did exactly what I asked, sweetheart. I am proud of you." Her voice never rose. She simply brushed away the tears Ava had been hiding and smiled warmly. "And you never have to earn the right to sit where you belong." Karen forced a smile and stepped forward. "Ma'am, there seems to have been some confusion." Monica stood slowly. Calm. Composed. But the warmth in her eyes had changed. Not anger. Something stronger. Every mother on earth carries it. The instinct to protect. Eric adjusted his tie nervously. Sophia took a small step closer. William Carter smiled faintly. Around the cabin, passengers watched in silence. Nobody touched their phones. Nobody returned to their laptops. They all understood something had changed. Because the little girl who had waited faithfully for her mother no longer sat alone. And as Monica Johnson gently placed a hand on Ava's shoulder and looked directly at the people standing before her, nobody in first class realized they were about to discover that the woman they had underestimated was far more than just a concerned mother returning to her seat. The strongest people in the room are often the ones who never need to raise their voices. Monica Johnson stood beside her daughter with one hand resting gently on Ava's shoulder. Her eyes moved calmly from Karen Mitchell to Eric Collins. There was no anger in her face. No shouting. No drama. Just the quiet confidence of a woman who had spent her entire life learning how to protect what mattered most. Karen forced another smile. "Ma'am, there was just some confusion. We were trying to help." Monica nodded politely. "I understand." Then perhaps you can help me understand something. Her voice was soft, almost comforting. Why was my daughter told she did not belong in the seat printed on her boarding pass? The question hung over the cabin. Nobody spoke. Eric cleared his throat. Well, she was alone. Monica smiled faintly. For 6 minutes. Sophia Green lowered her eyes. William Carter folded his newspaper with satisfaction. Thomas Reynolds looked out the window, suddenly interested in the clouds. Monica knelt beside Ava and adjusted her daughter's headphones. Baby, are you okay? Ava nodded. Mr. Buttons and I were brave. Monica kissed her forehead. I know you were. Then she stood again. Karen shifted nervously. We were simply trying to follow procedure. Monica reached into her purse and calmly removed an identification badge. Eric's eyes widened immediately. Karen blinked twice. Sophia froze. Because the badge hanging in Monica's hand identified her as a senior director of passenger experience for the airline itself, a position responsible for training standards and customer relations across the company. The color drained from Karen's face. Wait. Monica smiled gently. I was attending a conference this morning. That is why I had to answer a call before takeoff. Nobody moved. William Carter slowly removed his glasses. Thomas Reynolds stared openly. Sophia covered her mouth. But Monica never changed her expression. She simply looked back at Ava. Sweetheart, remember what Mommy tells you. Ava smiled. We belong where we are supposed to be. Monica nodded proudly. Exactly. Then she turned back toward Karen and Eric. My concern is not that you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. My concern is that you looked at a child sitting quietly with a valid ticket and decided she had to prove she belonged before you ever learned her name. The cabin was completely silent. Even the sounds of boarding seemed far away. Karen lowered her head. Eric stared at the floor. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. And while the people around her struggled with embarrassment, Monica Johnson simply sat beside her daughter again, wrapped an arm around Ava's shoulders, and smiled warmly at the little girl who had never stopped believing her mother would come back. Silence can teach lessons that anger never could. The first-class cabin remained unusually quiet after Monica Johnson finished speaking. Nobody looked at their phones. Nobody returned to their laptops. It was as though everyone had suddenly remembered that they were surrounded by people, not titles, not seats, not assumptions. Ava Johnson sat beside her mother with Mr. Buttons safely tucked beneath her arm and a peaceful smile slowly returning to her face. She leaned her head against Monica's shoulder and whispered, Mommy, I knew you would come back. Monica kissed the top of her daughter's head and smiled. I always will, sweetheart. Sophia Green quietly wiped away tears before approaching seat 2A. Miss Johnson, she said softly. I am sorry I did not speak sooner. Monica smiled warmly. You spoke when it mattered. That is what counts. Sophia nodded and looked at Ava. You are very brave. Ava smiled shyly and held up Mr. Buttons. He helped. William Carter laughed gently. I think Mr. Buttons deserves frequent flyer miles. The cabin finally relaxed enough for a few people to smile. Even Thomas Reynolds stood from his seat and approached slowly. Miss Johnson, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions I should not have made. Monica nodded politely. Thank you. Admitting that takes character. Thomas looked toward Ava. Young lady, I hope you never stop believing in yourself. Ava smiled. Mommy says I belong wherever God puts me. Thomas lowered his eyes and smiled. Your mother sounds wise. Nearby, Karen Mitchell stood motionless. The confidence she had carried earlier had vanished. Eric Collins looked equally uncomfortable. Finally, Karen stepped forward quietly. Miss Johnson, I am truly sorry. Monica looked at her calmly. Karen, mistakes happen. But children remember how adults make them feel. That is why kindness matters. Karen nodded with tears in her eyes. I understand. Monica smiled gently. Then let this be something we learn from, not something we carry forever. Even Eric found the courage to speak. Miss Johnson, I apologize too. Monica nodded. Thank you? There was no victory in her face. No satisfaction. Just peace. Because protecting her daughter had never been about winning. It had always been about teaching. A few moments later, boarding was completed. The engines outside began to hum softly. Ava adjusted her headphones and snuggled against her mother. Mommy? Yes, baby? Mr. Buttons was brave too. Monica laughed quietly. Yes, he was. The little girl smiled. And you came back. Monica wrapped her arm around her daughter and looked out at the clouds beyond the window. I promised I would. Around them, passengers smiled quietly. Because somewhere between the judgment and the silence, everyone on that airplane had been reminded that no child should ever have to prove where they belong. And no loving mother ever forgets a promise. Some children forget what happened. Others carry the lesson for the rest of their lives. As the airplane climbed above the clouds, the warm afternoon sunlight poured through the windows and painted the first-class cabin with golden colors. Most passengers had settled back into their seats, but something inside the room had changed forever. Ava Johnson rested peacefully against her mother's shoulder with Mr. Buttons tucked safely beneath her arm. Her coloring book lay open again, and the rainbow she had started earlier was finally finished. Monica Johnson smiled as she watched her daughter carefully choose a blue crayon. Mommy? Ava whispered softly. Yes, sweetheart? Did I do something wrong? Monica turned immediately and lifted her daughter's chin gently. Baby, no. You did everything right. Ava looked down at Mr. Buttons. Then why did they think I did not belong? Monica smiled warmly. Because sometimes people forget to look with kindness before they look with their eyes. But where you belong has never been decided by strangers. Ava thought about that for a moment, and then nodded. Okay. A few rows away, William Carter smiled quietly and returned to his newspaper. Thomas Reynolds looked out the window, lost in thought. Sophia Green prepared drinks with a lighter heart. Even Karen Mitchell moved more slowly now, speaking softly with passengers and carrying a humility that had not been there before. Monica wrapped an arm around her daughter and looked out toward the endless clouds. You know what Grandma used to tell me? She asked. Ava smiled. What? Monica laughed softly. She used to say, do not waste your life trying to convince people you belong. Spend your life becoming the person God created you to be. Ava smiled. Grandma sounds smart. She was. The little girl hugged Mr. Buttons and yawned. Mommy? Yes, baby? Thank you for coming back. Monica kissed her forehead. I will always come back. Ava closed her eyes with a smile. Around them, passengers quietly relaxed into the peaceful hum of the engines. Nobody spoke about seat numbers anymore. Nobody talked about first class. Because somewhere between fear and love, a little girl had taught an entire cabin something they would never forget. Not through anger. Not through shouting. But through trust. Through innocence. Through faith in a promise. And as the airplane sailed peacefully above the clouds, Monica looked down at the sleeping face of her daughter and whispered softly, Never let anybody tell you where you belong, sweetheart. You were born with dignity. You do not have to earn it. Outside the window, the sun dipped lower and painted the sky with gold. And wrapped in her mother's arms, with Mr. Buttons beside her and peace in her heart, Ava Johnson drifted to sleep knowing the most important truth of all. Love always comes back.